First of all, show of hands, how many people here have been around for a couple of days exploring the larger South by Southwest event? Great. Well, if you're like me, you've probably downloaded a heap load of apps that may or may not be on your phone in 2 weeks, testing them out, figuring out what they do, and keeping the ones that are actually going to have real value in your life. So I'm excited today, as part of the GoodxGlobal event, to bring some of the innovators and technology solution developers that are bringing the must-have apps to the developing world and supporting those who are doing so. On our panel today, we have some outstanding people. We have Vinil Vadi, who's co-founder and CTO of Sunera, that provides warehousing and Oracle solutions, but in 2011, joined together with his company to kind of expand out and started the Farmer Connect platform, a platform that provides critical agricultural information to about 1 million farmers in Africa and connects those farmers with NGOs and agribusiness for direct communications that's enhancing their profitability and productivity. We also have Susan, who you'll hear from later in much greater detail on her mFarm product, and she is amazing. Her company focuses on increasing livelihoods in Kenya with small-scale African farmers, and Susan was named one of the East Africa's top 20 young innovators in 2012, and she's a stellar mobile developer. And then lastly, we have Seema Patel, who's worked with me at DAI for, well, I haven't been there for 4 years, but you've been there for 4 years. And specifically, she is on board advising USAID on public-private partnerships and open innovation. And she's currently working with the U.S. Agency for International Development's Office of Science and Technology. Prior to joining the world of development, she worked with Citigroup as a financial analyst focused on tech IPOs. So please welcome our speakers today with a round of applause. So I thought it would be great to just first start off and hear a little bit about what each of you are doing. Maybe Vinil, you could start off and give us a little brief history of Farmer Connect and how it came about.
Sure. Loud and clear? Okay. Yeah, so this is Vinil. I grew up on a farm in India, in a southern part of India, in a village, in a small village. I come from a farming background. Then landed up in the US working on software and stuff like that. But like Farmer Connect, so what is Farmer Connect? Farmer Connect, like the name says, is it's a platform for connecting farmers with all the corporations and agencies that are working for a farmer or are selling into a farmer. So that basically, it's a connect platform. It's as simple as that. But why Farmer Connect? And how did it come about? Is that, on one of my trips to India, I was reading a local newspaper, and I was reading an article, me and my co-founder were reading an article on counterfeit seeds and how it resulted in a bad crop, and how that bad crop resulted in a large number of suicides in a village that was very close by to my native village. And we thought, we should be doing something about that. And then we developed a small solution where we said, okay, can farmers validate anything that they buy is not counterfeit, and we developed a small anti-counterfeiting solution. But then while we were working with those farmers, what we observed was the problem was deeper. It was not just counterfeit seeds, or it was not just getting bad chemicals for things like that. Then we realized that it was all about making the farmer profitable, right? So, and making him sustainable and profitable as a producer, so that he continues to keep farming for generations together. Because we realized that I was among one of the last, that came out of my generation, and there was no farmers in my family anymore, which is kind of sad. So then we said, okay, so what are the problems? Then we said, okay, what does a farmer need? Day in the life of a farmer, what does he need? What are his wants? What are his needs? And then we started looking at that, and then we came up with a lot of needs and wants, and we mapped those and then said, okay, who are the guys who can serve these wants and needs of a farmer? And how is it getting done today? How can we improve that so that both the agencies and the corporations working for a farmer or selling into a farmer can become more productive, as well as which will in turn result into making the farmer more profitable and making farming a more sustainable business model in India, because India is basically an agricultural economy. It's 1.2 billion population, running towards 2 billion. We need food on the table. So we said, yeah, one farmer at a time. If we can make a change, make him profitable, it makes great sense. And today we are serving close to 1 million farmers.
Great, that's excellent. We're lucky enough to have a similar but very different story coming from Kenya. Susan, can you tell us what you've been up to?
Yeah, just like any other tech lady or tech community in Silicon Valley, I'm from Silicon Savannah, which is Nairobi, Kenya. And as Vinil, I came from a farming background. And one thing in Kenya is that farming is known for a poor man. Like, only farmers are known as poor people in Kenya. And that's what my parents wanted to get me out of, to take me to campus back in Nairobi town, which is like the hotspot of technology, to nurture my technology skills and come up with something good that will like entice the blue chip companies back in Nairobi. So me and 3 young passionate women back in Nairobi who have tech backgrounds came together through a social gathering which is focused on women in IT, called Akira Chicks, which one of my colleagues, Angela from Ushahidi, talked about. And from there, we were training women back in the slums on programming skills. And that's how I met them. And from there, we realized we all had the same background, which is we came from farming background. So there was a competition called IPO 48. And there was a blog that there were no women in this tech competition. And that's when we wanted to go represent Akira Chicks in this competition. But the thing was, from our backgrounds, we decided to come with a product called mFarm. mFarm, its mission is to increase the livelihoods of small-scale farmers. And by this, we give them market price information and link them to buyers just by a simple technology called SMS. So, of course, our parents were like, we took you to school and you come back. Why? They're like, because we want to help you. The skills that you've gotten are the ones that will help us improve the situation back in our community. So we decided to pivot it in Nairobi, in the rural areas, whereby if you look, 80% of the Kenyan population live in the rural areas, and out of this, 70% are small-scale farmers. And one of the major things that farmers go through is that first, they don't have access to good market. Second, they don't have access to information of what their values are going for in the market. And third, they don't have access to affordable farm inputs. And these are people who live on $2 a day. How can you expect them to support the Kenyan economy, knowing that 60% of the Kenyan GDP is supported by agriculture? And that's how the mFarm technology came about.
Great, great. Susan, can you talk a little bit more, very briefly, just about the process you went through from that original idea to what it is today?
Okay. So same as Vinil, we went back to the farms. Of course, I left my parents home 6 years ago. And I had to go back and like talk to them and ask them, what are your problems? Because we've read it from newspapers, we've read it from journals, that farmers go through these three major problems. There's an example that we saw, a sweet potato farmer living in the western side of Kenya was complaining so much that the middlemen back at home coming and asking him for his sweet potatoes at a small price, at a lower price. And one of the major things he wanted to do is to take his kids to school. And that's why he sold off his produce at that price. He has no access to better markets. And we realized also, just by giving them information, we also need to be there hands-on to give them access to market. And we told them, look, you have this simple phone that can only text and call. And one of the major things you can do, apart from sending mobile money, which is a popular technology back in Kenya called M-Pesa, you can also increase your livelihood using it. So we realized information only does not help them. They need to actually sell the produce to increase their livelihood. So from this we realized, apart from them seeing us city girls coming back home to help, they needed to actually make us feel involved in the day-to-day social life. So that's how we decided to come up with an agent model that assists farmers to actually come up with produce that are reaching to the standards of what the urban market requires, so that they can be able to get that value of their produce. So with this, we piloted for 6 months, and later realized this is something that not only farmers in Kenya, but farmers in the East African region and also in India can benefit off from.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I found very interesting in talking to both Susan and Vinil over the last few days is there are these real symmetries between these, two different countries, two different continents, but here are people that have local knowledge as well as tech savvy. They are passionate about helping people on the ground, but they're also going back and really understanding the local context to build these. And I think that was one of the lessons that we wanted to bring across in this panel, is that it is really about these simple solutions, building off of trust, building off of partnerships to make this happen. So I want to now kick it over to Seema Patel, who works with USAID, advising them on how they can have the greatest impact within the science and technology space, to talk a little bit about what donors are actively doing or the directions that they need to be going to kind of support the types of great work that's coming out of these places, kind of organically, kind of strategically.
Hi. So I think these stories are wonderful. They're a wonderful example of exactly the type of innovators and entrepreneurs and the spirit that donors have been wanting to engage with for a very long time. Traditionally, most donor-funded programs are very prescriptive. We want to solve these exact problems. We're going to tell you how to do it, and then we'll give you the grant, and we'll measure how you do it. And there's not a lot of freedom in that construct to engage with the kind of people that you see on this panel, and to give them the freedom and the space to really understand the needs, to ideate, to make mistakes, to pilot, to take 2 steps back. I think it's very clear that any path of an entrepreneur, from seeing a problem in the market to coming up with a solution and getting it really piloted and scaled, is never a straight path. It's windy, it's curvy, it's got lessons along the way. And so the office that I'm working with at USAID, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, is trying to find approaches to really help support innovators like this, really fill gaps, provide safety nets, provide funding, provide networks that they can engage with to help them through some of the tough times along the way. One of the programs that I'd like to put out there, and I can talk about a few of them, but it's the Grand Challenges for Development, which is a funding program organized around specific problem sets. And what we're trying to do is identify and engage networks of solvers to come and bring their solutions, and to allow us at USAID to really help engage with them on a one-to-one basis and get them through the trajectory. So we've got Grand Challenges addressing the first 48 hours after childbirth for child and maternal health care, called Saving Lives at Birth. There's another one that was released recently called Powering Agriculture, and it's really to source and catalyze solutions around renewable energy for agriculture, productivity gains. And so what we're trying to do is put out some problem statements, send a market signal, and really convene and catalyze solvers to come to the table. We've gotten solutions from around the world, and I hope that they are from people that are, exactly like you, that are, seeing a need in the market, kind of at a stage looking around for where can I get the funding to help support me. And we've gotten thousands of submissions. It's a global program, so they've come in from, Powering Ag just got 500 submissions from 75 countries around the world. And we're now going through a process of vetting and selecting. And through that process, we're trying to get the feedback loop to the entrepreneurs and the innovators that have submitted solutions so that they can see from our panel of judges and experts, where there are places where they may be thinking about improving their business model or their technology or their approaches to creating demand within the market for their products and services, and they can bring and improve their solutions down the road. But for the ones we have engaged with and actually funded, so in Saving Lives at Birth, there's a community of 60 innovators that are getting resources from aid. And that's just one side of the story. The other is what are we really doing to help them accelerate and scale? And some of the investments made there are helping to connect them to each other. So just peer-to-peer networking, kind of like the story I hear in Akira Chicks, a community, a social network of like-minded peers that are struggling through the same things. So we're doing a lot of peer-to-peer connecting through online mechanisms and offline events and engagements that way. The other is just access to partners, networks like investor networks, mentors, and so we're starting to build the infrastructure, and this is very new for an agency like USAID to really think of themselves as not the big funder, but part of the platform in which the ecosystem can form around. But what we're doing there, examples is like the Center for Accelerating Impact that's sitting within the Health Bureau, and what it's doing is bringing together mentors that are engineers and technical specialists and investors and potential distribution partners from the private sector that may be interested in engaging with some of the innovators that we've sourced through the program. So we want to build those relationships, and I think it's really exciting for USAID to take kind of this approach where we're not just supporting kind of grant programs that are for general progress, but that we're really going out there and trying to pick winners and innovators and really, let them be the kind of charge towards impact, and we kind of come in as a support networks.
Great. So, Susan, I know that as you said, one of the catalysts for mFarm was this prize, which it sounds like donors are very much on top of. USAID is doing. Gates Foundation, one of the sponsors for today, is doing as well. But I'm wondering if you could talk, and then Vinil, you can chime in too, on some of the other critical success factors. What's made your organizations and companies be able to reach the point you have?
I'm actually grateful to the tech scene back in Nairobi, and this has attracted lots of investors from Silicon Savannah, from Europe, donor funds coming in. And with this hub that we are actually incubating called the iHub, we've got lots of business mentorship. We've got lots of exposure to the international markets and also to the international kind of mentorship. And also with this space, we are able to actually work with other tech people in within who are actually trying to solve what you're trying to solve, like in terms of education, health, all of this, and agriculture, all of these factors, they have something that connects them. And also it gives an encouragement to a budding entrepreneur to come up with a solution that can help the 40 million people in Nairobi and also to help the African continent. Other things are we have the same hub has mediators. These are people who are mediators between the entrepreneur and the investor, so that the investors don't know the scene of Nairobi or Kenya or Africa in itself. So these mediators talk to the investors so that they can understand that this is what Kenya is. This is the next big thing. And this is the opportunities that you have. Also, they help entrepreneurs to understand, of course, you want to have a social good going on, but you also have to make money, something that will help you sustain and grow in the future. So they also take us through this grueling process of understanding our business models, something that can scale and assist lots of farmers at the same time. Empower you, your company, and your team, and the people that you're trying to actually reach to. Also, it's an access point to donor funds, as I mentioned. USAID coming in, we got UN coming in. Like, it's a huge hub. Like, I think a month ago, the chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt, was there, and he actually wrote a blog and said, Africa is the next big thing. So it shows the greatness of the people within, just trying to use simple technology to make the place efficient, or to make the work of people living around Africa efficient.
Vinil, can you talk a little bit about your success and how it's happened?
Sure. I think one of the lessons learned when I look back at how we are serving 1 million farmers today, how did that happen, was I think one of the key was right from the day one we said Farmer Connect needs to be a business, it needs to make profit, and it needs to be sustainable, right? And then we said, okay, what we do with the profit is beside the point, but we need to build Farmer Connect as a sustainable business. And then we looked at, like I just discussed, we looked at the value for the farmer, day in the life of a farmer. What does he need? What does he really need, and what does he really want? And then we came up with examples. I can give you an example, like when we looked at businesses, like for example, the ones that make fertilizer for the farmer, when we looked at those businesses, one of the key problems for them was to predict how much fertilizer they're going to produce, right? And 60 to 70% of that cost of overproduction goes into fertilizer, right? Then we said, okay, how can we solve that? Then we said, if we can go to a village or an agency who's working with those farmers and pre-book that order and say, and give a minimum guaranteed order to the manufacturer and said, hey, you know what, I can give you 2 tons of fertilizer order for the next season. Can you reduce the cost for that fertilizer? And then it's a win-win situation for both of them. So that's how we went about testing these small value and very valuable types of deals that can make both ends win-win. And that is something we've been able to, we took one example and then we slowly started scaling it. And that, I think, is the, one of the key successes for us, where the businesses is not feeling left out, the farmer is not feeling left out. We are sitting right in the middle of their wants and needs. And there are multiple examples like that. For example, a tractor for a single farm, a tractor on a lease per day for plowing his farm would cost $3,000, which is close to what, $90 a day. And he used to charge $90 a day because he was 25 miles away. He would come, just service that farm, and go away. Now, if we were able to give him 3 orders in the same area, then he was ready to reduce the cost to about $30 per farm. So we were able to aggregate that kind of information and create a marketplace, right? And we learned most of this off existing successful business models like the Groupons. We studied closely as to how Groupon was able to incite that aspiration and trust from consumers. And we looked at the marketplace of Apple, right? How they were able to curate that value. What were the kind of things that they were doing that people gained that trust? And they were downloading apps from the marketplace, right? So these kind of things we studied, and then we went and did it one farmer per village, and it slowly grew like that. today, Farmer Connect is a profitable business model, a reasonably profitable business model. We take all our profits and put it back into scaling the system. We haven't got any funding. We are self-sustainable. But that's not to say that we are not looking at any funding avenues. One of the reasons I'm here today is for that, because we need to, now that we have, it's like the shark has tasted blood. Now we've got to, the passion is there for helping more and more farmers, more and more farmers. There's 600 billion farmers sitting there. So
I'm gonna throw you a curveball because I know you can handle it. But one thing I find really fascinating about the two panelists that have actually built these products, Susan and Vinil, is that on the surface they're very similar. They're products that serve small-scale farmers in developing contexts. They connect farmers to information and address the local needs within their various environments. But they do come from very different backgrounds. Vinil Farmer Connect grew out of an existing company. It was a diversification strategy that had a social mission element to it, and you brought with your team a whole toolkit of knowledge from business school, from serial entrepreneurship. You had the ability to kind of do some self-funding. Whereas mFarm, you guys were really, startup girls who had a passion, were newly out of university, had fallen into this great community, but really didn't have kind of the business skills or background that has allowed you, that you've gotten kind of the iHub and the various donor projects. And Seema, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how USAID is looking at these different demographics and what you see as some of the differences of pulling in the mFarms and pulling in the Farmer Connects.
Yeah, first of all, sorry for my voice. Just getting over a cold and struggling a bit. But yeah, I think it's, innovation can come from anywhere, and I think that's kind of the mantra that people need to understand and take. There is no one place where you're going to find an innovation coming out of, and they need different approaches from the perspective of funders and donors. And an opportunity to really look at companies that are spinning off new products and services to serve new markets at the base of the pyramid, that are looking at, what was originally thought of as beneficiaries, only, fit for charity, that there's active consumers and producers in those markets. I think it requires an approach from the donor to understand, this isn't startup capital that they really need or seed funding, and what they may need is some opportunity to really access some of those communities in which that company can serve. So Vinil comes from this extraordinary opportunity of being both a farmer and a businessman and a technologist all in one, but not all folks are like that. And I think looking at some of the big businesses like the multinationals that are looking into the emerging markets and the base of the pyramid and saying, man, I don't understand this market at all. I don't know what the people of rural Africa are doing in terms of the behaviors, their needs, their wants. I'm not close enough to the problem to really understand it. I think there's a big role for donors to really help to basically bring some transparency to what are the issues in terms of serving that market, what are the consumer needs, and really gathering evidence and presenting it in a way that business can understand, and then partnering with business. So there's a number of public-private partnerships that USAID has set up exactly to do this. It's to really serve as a bridge between companies that may not understand this market and to really bring and enhance and in some cases even subsidize their entry into that market so that they can pilot new products and services. The other story from Susan is that it requires a very different approach. There are coming out of a world where they're actually close to the problem. They're almost doing user-generated innovation. It's the people closest to the problem are able to solve it. They can see the needs, but they may not have the structure in place to really get the funding, get the business model, get international recognition for what they're doing, get a community and network of mentors and peers. And there, the approaches are similar to what we were thinking about within the open innovation programs, where we put out calls around specific problems to find them and to invest in them, and then accelerate them. And I think that's kind of the next stage is, while a company can spin off products and services, they're almost set for scale in some cases. They've got distribution mechanisms, they have processes as a company, and they can accelerate in a very different way once they have the product and service that really meets a consumer need, versus the small startup that really needs to, they scale more slowly. They need to find new models to do that, test those models, build the infrastructure to really grow. And I think that's where incubators and acceleration programs can be, very powerful in helping them get to that stage, especially if the incubators go beyond sort of the events and I think those are very powerful, not to say that they shouldn't be done, but if they really go towards focusing kind of the energy of the local ecosystem of investors and mentors on helping that entrepreneur think through some of the challenges of scaling. And I think that's a new place for, USAID as a donor has invested in business incubators around the world, but I don't think it's been very strategic. And I think there's an opportunity to think of business incubation beyond just, how do we kind of help businesses to understand the market, but really how do we promote a culture of innovation within a local sort of space like Nairobi.
Definitely, yeah. If we had the secret to replicating Nairobi,
I think we would do it.
Be a lot easier. So we have about 10 minutes left. I wanted to give the audience a chance to pop in with any questions. Is there any? Yeah.
I think it's helpful that we have both government representatives on the stage. How do you see the government itself playing a part in helping entrepreneurs in the farming community, especially smaller farms in the developing world? The U.S. government, for instance, in their subsidy policies and things of that nature. How do you think see that evolving, and are you seeing it become a positive at this point to support your efforts?
Okay.
Go for it.
I'll go for it. In Kenya, one of them, I've told you agriculture, substitutes 60% of the GDP. And you find that the government has a strong voice. And also the farmers have to believe that the government is actually assisting them to have better value for their produce. So you find that for us to be successful, at some point we have to work with the government, because we can't just go to the fairs without having the sanction of the government. We have to ensure that there are many other organizations helping farmers to have a better capacity building process. And you find that you have to also work with them. We are a business, they're an NGO, and we also have to work with them in terms of ensuring that the farmer comes out from the fact that he's not just farming for subsistence, but he's actually exiting with a commercial kind of farming. So the government plays a major role. And that's why I actually want to applaud the Kenyan government that they've worked on the agricultural sector, but they've only worked on some few crops that they call cash crops. For example, like coffee, tea, and sugarcane. But there are other crops that these small-scale farmers also work on that Kenyans also consume. These are products that we've seen local government trying to enhance the farmers to try and understand, listen, yes, you've been doing it for subsistence. People are going through drought, people are going through famine, but you'll find a point in Kenya that there's more food, and another point in Kenya there is no food. And you'll find that the government has to play a major role in the infrastructure. And I applaud that to the current, the past government, and now we have a new government going on. But they have tried their best to ensure that agriculture is the key to the Kenyan backbone, economy's backbone. So I actually applaud that, and they've also invited people like USAID and this big major donor fund, and they have actually funded the capacity building of a small-scale farmer by himself. You might be surprised that Kenya actually grows produce for export. The more produce that you see being eaten in Europe and some that come to the US, Kenya supplies them. And they also compete with some African countries. And this shows what our government has put in place to help the small-scale farmers back at home.
If I can jump in too, DAI is a global implementer of a lot of USAID programming. And I think that one thing that's becoming more of a trend is seeing kind of these projects that have a holistic mission of what they're meant to accomplish. So for instance, we have a project called Kenya Firm, and it focuses on assisting small-scale farmers in Kenya get access to finance as its major mission, but it works across a number of verticals. So it works across policy and regulatory reform. It works with financial institutions on the specific efficiency and profitability questions. And it also has an explicit focus that USAID has put into the overall terms of reference that looks at ICT, so information and communication technologies. So we've been working with groups that have innovative mobile solutions or web solutions for people along the agricultural value chain to give them kind of some of this business assistance, the mentorship, and all the things that Susan's talking about. So I do think from a government perspective, it's not just about regulation. You know, we can't have these separate programs about regulation, about technology, about extension workers. It really needs to be, and more is, this kind of bigger picture approach where you have a project that's focused across. Are there any other questions?
If I may add to that question, in India especially, the government does a lot of help for farmers, right? There's close to 500,000 agencies, one for every 5 villages, right? There's an agency, and there are about 2 people helping farmers for every 5 villages. So that's a lot of activity going on there. So the way we looked at it is, how can we make this government infrastructure that is helping farmers today become more effective and more productive, right? For example, when we looked at what these agencies were doing, there are 2 very positive things. One is the agency representatives, they had a lot of trust built into the farmers, into the local farmers, right? These guys were listening to whatever those guys were saying because of years of interaction and relationship building with them. Then we said, okay, let's work with these guys and make them more productive. So today, for example, we have a program for all these agencies. They can come onto the portal and then send messages from with particular signatures from saying, okay, I am Subbaya from so-and-so village. So that's one of the things that we did where, that one rep can now serve 4 villages instead of 1 village through the SMS system that we've put in place. So kind of we came the other way around and we said, okay, how, if there's this large investment going into the into helping the farmer that's being done by the government, how can we make that more productive and more effective? And so that's one of the things that we do.
Great. We have about 3 minutes left if anybody has another question that's burning. Yeah.
You talked about consolidating the policy. You talked about having everything funds for good or good customers that also include like environment and health.
I mean, maybe Seema can talk to this because but it is varied across the different projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think USAID has put in a new effort around creating sort of a cross-sector kind of approaches so that they, we realize that working on agriculture productivity, you also have to think about nutrition locally in terms of the health impacts of what you're growing and whether people are getting nutritious, balanced diet. If it's all cash crops, you're not really focused on the gains that could be made on the health outcomes or the gains that can be made on the environmental outcomes if you're not thinking about renewable energy or access to water and some of the other issues that surround, obviously, agriculture. So there's a Feed the Future program, a policy program that's got cross-government collaboration within the United States, and it's really bringing together folks from these different, who work kind of technically in one box together to really think through what are the impacts across this and how can we design programs to think holistically about our approaches and the impacts that they could have. Also integrated into that is this idea of commercialization of technologies that can be impactful. So it's almost taking the the market that the project is trying to serve, and then also creating sort of a supply side driven technology throughput for it. You know, it can be done more. It's really, I wish there was a little bit more holistic thinking on that. On some of the programs that Office of Science and Technology Policy is designing, what we do to start off, how, you know, what problem statement should we put out there? What prize? We just did a prize on technology to prevent mass atrocity. What prizes should we put out there? The first step is often a convening to get together people from basically parts of the agency that didn't really think that they needed to work together, and just get them in the room and talk about the consequences, do a couple storytelling to see what the potential is, just to craft the problem statement or the call to action that we're putting out to innovators, make sure it's a bit holistic.
Yeah, it's a great example. We're out of time, but Seema, Susan, and I will be around all day and through the night. I know Vinil has to catch a plane, so we'll be leaving around 5 or so, but please come up to us, chat, tweet us, whatever. We'd love to talk more about these issues in depth. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.